Okay, so I'm going to assume this is people are arriving as participants. I know they are arriving as participants because I can see the number going up. 87, 91, 95. This sounds too much like temperatures to me. 103.
Don't tell us the numbers.
I can't. I would try to convert to Celsius, but I'm American, so I don't know how to do that. They told us in the U.S. that we were, and I think this is an important model for sustainability. When I was growing up in the 70s, it was going to be the metric system. This is going to happen. This huge change. Well, Blair, where did you grow up, Blair?
Yeah, I same thing. I'm from California,
and I grew up in Ohio, so.
I learned the metric system and the imperial system at the same time. I went to school at Wright State, so I was also.
Wow, I lived in Dayton. That's where I grew up.
Oh, funnily enough.
So we have, as people come on the webinar now, we're just having a little chat, a little coffee table chat before to make sure everybody gets in. But yeah, so that it's interesting because that was the thing. It was going to be the metric system. We're going to be transform society. It's going to be incredible.
Lasted like 2 years, maybe 2 years.
But I remember the metric training and the schools. You had films. The metric system is going to happen. And yeah.
By the time
when my daughter is ill, I still have to switch over to English to see if she's actually got a fever or not.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, so it looks like we've got a good number of our participants on, and so we'll kind of officially launch into this. And thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. We have one of our participants is a producer, which means he's on a phone call. And so he will be joining us very shortly. But in the meantime, so I'm Neal Romanek. I'm the head of communications and events at Albert, and you have signed into the Albert Sustainability Masterclass called A Sustainable Serpent, Redesigning Film and TV Production Design. And for those of you who don't know, Albert is part of BAFTA. You can see behind me, there's a picture of some guys with some BAFTAs, wearing BAFTA masks. We are located in London. In fact, I'm looking out the window, literally at the London Eye. And Albert is the world's top sustainability organization for film and TV. We convene broadcasters, producers, production companies, studios to try to create sustainable practices in the entertainment industry. And our carbon calculator is used around the world by productions to measure their carbon footprint and reduce their carbon footprint. We have 4 amazing guests with us today. And I'm really excited to hear what they have to say. We're going to have, this isn't actually on the invitation, but you guys who are attending have a bonus today. We're going to do what we call the Albert After Party. So there will be 1 hour of the official webinar, the conversation that we're going to have. And then for a half hour afterwards, it was going to be open up in the Q&A to questions that you want to ask our panelists. So that should be really cool. We have Mac Apostolides. I hope I pronounced that right, Mac. He's a managing director.
Way closer than most people ever get. So thank you.
Apostolides. Yeah. Sweet. He's managing director of CAMA ASSETSORE. They provide long-term storage and reuse of production assets. We also have Blair Barnette, who's the chair of the British Film Designers Guild. Karl Liegis is a co-producer of the Essex Serpent, which we'll be talking about today. He's our producer who's on the phone, but will be joining us momentarily. And we also have Limmer, who's a filmmaker with a specialty in climate crisis storytelling and sustainable production methods. And she was the sustainability officer on the Essex Serpent. So it's going to be great. We're going to be we'll talk about the production design generally, but we'll also get some really great case study detail about the Essex Serpent, which won the Planet Positive Awards at the British Film Designers Guild's Awards just recently. So just kind of some scene setting. David Lean blew up a bridge. And in fact, he blew up a bridge with a train on it. I say David Lean because he was one of my favorite directors. And David Lean, the great British director, also was one of the people who started BAFTA. But the bridge on the River Kwai, he builds a bridge. He drives a train across the bridge. He blows up the bridge and the train to get a shot. His next movie, Lawrence of Arabia, also blows up the train. Dr. Zhivago, a lot of trains in that one. Doesn't blow any up, but he does cover the Spanish countryside with marble dust to make it look like snow. See, Ryan's Daughter, next movie, builds a entire Irish village from scratch in Ireland. Also flies down to South Africa because the cliffs in Ireland don't actually look like the Irish cliffs that he wants. In A Passage to India, he goes to India and builds from scratch a Indian marketplace because the real Indian marketplaces don't look quite right. He also blows some holes in a big, beautiful rock face there because he needs some caves. So, you know, this is how movies are made, and there's something I still love, this idea, and I'm slightly in awe of this idea that people will do anything to get the shot, will do anything to get that image, you know, and it's very attractive. It's a very attractive idea. And, you know, you look at, you know, you can also think of lots of other examples of, you know, the Apocalypse Now and the napalm blast that starts a movie, or pretty much any Jim Cameron movie. But we're actually entering a time now where we are facing an environmental crisis, and that means we have to find different ways of doing things. And it is maybe even an element of grief of going, you know, we can't do that crazy stuff we used to do. Can't do it anymore. We have to find a different way of doing it. And so this webinar hopefully will shed a little bit of light on that as we look at production design, what we're doing wrong, but what we're doing right, and how we can use production design, which is at the heart of creating those new worlds that we see on screen. How can we use production design in a way that is sustainable and also promotes sustainable practice across the industry? So I'm going to open it up with a question to the panel, to everybody. What are your sustainability horror stories in production design? What is the worst thing you have ever heard of in production design or set decoration or the art department that makes you just gasp when you think about the waste or the lack of sustainability? Blair, you want to go first? Because I know you've seen a lot.
Where do I begin? I mean,
you don't have to name any names.
I mean, a lot of it is construction. I mean, there's been jobs that I've worked on before that we've built everything was beautiful, like flats, you know, loads of construction, and something's gone on. We've had to down tools, or they've cut that set or something, or we're going to schedule it later on, and they just waste it all. Instead of like storing it somewhere and bringing it back or selling it to another production, or production's like, oh no, this is a really special design. No one's made a door like that before. We have to destroy it or before somebody else can see our door, you know? And it's just, I hate things that are made to be destroyed. I mean, but that's part of our business. So it's kind of hard to get around that. But I think the thing that gets me the most is when we waste animals. That really, really gets me in the heart. I mean, you talk about old-fashioned, you know, all those movies that you were talking about, you know, back in the day, if they wanted horses to trip and fall down, they put a trip line, you know, across so that they would stumble and they would fall, and everybody would do that. Of course, that would break their legs and then they'd be lame. So they have to put the horses down. So they knew that they were going to kill horses to get the shot. And, you know, it's just like a lot of these super dramatic films that you've just mentioned have those sort of shots in them. Obviously, you know, you can't do that now. And we found a way to animals that looks pretty good, you know, so you don't even have to stress them out on set or make them, you know, put dangerous situations. So that's really good. But I mean, I've had, even it was a tiny little commercial, and so, you know, they were sitting around the writer's room, and somebody goes, oh, I know it would be a really good idea. Why don't we have a fish storm? you know, like Magnolia style with like the frogs coming down. Well, let's just have a fish storm. Blair, can you get us a fish storm? And I'm like, yeah, okay. I'll get us a fish storm. And then, so I ended up doing this and making this big contraption and getting all these fish from the market. And as I brought, you know, I was
like real fish, like
yeah,
not,
yeah, real. We couldn't afford, you know, and it was like 1,000 fish, and we couldn't afford, you know, 1,000 models. You know, it had to happen the next day. It was somebody's idea as we were wrapping the night before. What about tomorrow? We have a fish storm. So that was I'll say this now, that this is the last time that I've used any sort of live animals or dead animals on set, any real animals. That broke my heart so much that like each one of these fish could feed 4 people. I mean, they were large fish. And we got 1,000 of them and just threw them on the ground. Do you know what I mean? You think about how many dinners that is. And then you think about how these beautiful animals that were swimming around that like, you know, would just lost their lives just to be a random fish storm.
And do you remember, well, I guess I was going to ask you what the product was, but maybe.
Oh, it was a jacket.
Oh, jacket. Okay.
It
I hope it was a good jacket.
Yeah, it was saying, oh, this will weather anything, even fish storms. And you know, and then I tried to give them away to like zoos at least, going, look, can you feed these fish to animals? You know, and some of them that we didn't even use, I tried to give away to fish to like soup kitchens and stuff. And you know, nobody could take them because they couldn't follow the line. Anyway, we made it happen. I took home a lot of fish. I ate fish a lot for a while. But I made a vow at that point in time that I would never be so wasteful with, you know, an organic life again. Anyway, that's one of my horror stories.
That's pretty horrific. Raining fish is horrific. Mac, you guys specialize in keeping stuff from being thrown away. But what are some of the stuff that you've seen? You know,
this is so unfair because there is no way I can follow that story with anything interesting. I find that's quite upsetting, actually. That's horrible.
Yeah, 10 years later, I'm still upset about it. I'm still mad at myself for like allowing them to talk me into it.
I get that. I found it quite upsetting listening to it. So look, I've got nothing like that, nothing that's very funny. But one of the early productions we worked on was one of the biggest productions in the world, and I'm not going to name them because they'll have very expensive lawyers. But there was like a bathroom scene with all Villaroy box sanitary ware that was never plumbed in, never used apart from background. And when we went down to the set, they were throwing it in the skip. And at the time, we were doing a lot of work, as we still do, with Single Homeless Project. And it was probably enough there to kit out an entire hostel with brand new sanitary ware that would have lasted them decades. And it just all went in the skip. And it was one of the things that kind of drove me to get into this a bit more, because obviously we're from outside the industry, but it just made me think this is something we can make a difference here.
Lily, you've come to the industry fairly new to the industry, and so you probably heard of stuff, but it'd be interesting to sort of hear what your first impression of things was when you sort of arrived.
Yeah, I mean, the first time I was really like shocked by waste was actually following the Essex Serpent. I went and worked at a really big studio where they had like 5 or 6 feature films shooting at once and some TV shows. And I was kind of like put in this tiny little cabin at the far end of this like old airfield, and there were some workshops next to me, and I wanted to go in and like make some friends on my first day. I was like, what are you guys up to in here? And I discovered it was just this row of like temporary structures being heated by generators, amazingly, on a studio site. And they were basically foam workshops where they bring in huge canisters of like spray foam, which starts off like a liquid, and you can spray it into molds and then it hardens really fast. And that was the day that I discovered that we were building basically the entirety of the film set from foam. Again, this wasn't the Essex Serpent, but it's because it's super cheap, it's super lightweight, and it's really, really fast. And I mean facades of like 5-story buildings made from foam. And the thing about foam is that it sticks to whatever it's on. it's completely non-recyclable. There's absolutely nothing you can do with hard foam. It's insanely toxic, and it then contaminates whatever you've put it onto. So you also can't recycle the frames that you're using. And that was just like, that just blew my mind to see this material. It's basically the worst material in the world, and we were just building everything out of it because it's so cheap. And it's really dangerous for the people that are using it. They're just stuck inside a room for 8 hours a day spraying this like toxic foam around. So that was, I would say that was a horror.
That is horrifying. Karl has joined us. Hello, Karl. Great to see you. You could jump in on this. That would be great. This is just we're just getting warmed up with some production design and set construction horror stories to sort of set the mood. You don't have to talk about any production you've worked on, because those are all amazing, I know. But you know, if you've heard about anything from somebody else that you'd like to gripe about, we would love to hear it, or gossip.
Not really. Not really. I'm always looking for, firstly, apologies for being late. I think that what you get is a lot of people talking about the problems, but then not talking about the potential solutions, which is kind of the easiest thing to do. So I think that my time, and maybe the audience's time, is better spent talking about the good stuff as opposed to the bad stuff. I think that as an industry, we're in a situation where we are not sustainable, where we are not doing enough, and there is a lot of energy moving towards. There's a lot of energy and goodwill towards being sustainable and taking actions, but we just got to be more aligned with our approach, and that's like broadcasters, that's production companies, that's individuals, that's heads of department, that's everyone. So I think that for me, it's like, but mindful at the same time of greenwashing with this by saying that there's loads of good stuff that's happening, because actually everyone, you know, Mac and CAMA are an exception, whereby their business model is not something that they're precious about creating a competitive market in. Mac will tell you himself he would love it if there were millions of CAMA businesses that he was competing with. So, but I think that there is this sense that businesses are being made out of sustainability, and there's an idea where you have a business that's created to solve a problem, that's born out of trying to create a solution to a problem, and then there is a business that's made because there's an opportunity, there's a business opportunity, and that to me is where the danger is. And so while that doesn't exist in the horror realm, for me that's where the problem is. We just have to get more aligned and be just authentic in actually trying to transform the industry and create a foundation on which we're all going to build.
Thanks for that. That was the great transition I was looking for. And there is so I think that is, I mean, we all, you know, there's endless horror stories we can kind of come up with, or maybe I don't, horror stories probably isn't even the word, but we could just sort of say that areas maybe where things aren't coordinated, or people aren't informed, or people are just doing their job, you know. And I wonder what your thoughts might be on, like, where are the kind of the major wins, or, you know, where are the things that you think, okay, if we could just solve this problem, or if we just kind of concentrated our energy on this problem, that would be a big boost to the sustainability in terms of the art department production design. Because you can think, you know, give like a massive list of all the things you could possibly do, but what are the kind of the big wins, or the big things that, you know, if we could just change this, that would get us so far?
Well, for me, I find one of the biggest culprit is transportation, logistics, moving crews from one place to another. We were just talking about like here working in Budapest, doubling the city for other cities so that we're not flying 52 people to another country, you know, burning all those fossil fuels. But then even just like getting people to work, you know, if we could be you know, there's some sort of strategic way to be clever so that people weren't commuting so often, or, you know, doing more things in studios if we had more studios, so that people were coming in. It seems like the fuel costs and the transporting things and moving things and ordering things on Amazon and getting things shipped in, and you know, like that seems to be the biggest culprit of waste. So you know, and you can unpack that in so many different ways. You know, I did a also for the Planet Positive Award, I did a Meta commercial where we did everything you could possibly think of by Zoom, where we would actually send one person to the studio with like a camera and filming everything so that everybody could sit in their respective places. So we didn't have 40 people on a recce. We had one cameraman on a recce who was actually showing us things. And that's something we kind of learned during COVID times. And that,
I wondered about, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that kind of, we learned this, that there's like new ways of doing things, that we can do a lot of things remotely. So when you can do something remotely, if it doesn't impact the work, I think you should aim for that.
What is it like when you're, because obviously if you're going to location, you're going to Budapest or wherever it is you're going, you're not having to build Budapest, it's there, you know? So you're saying, okay, we don't have to build all that stuff. We're not all that set waste and all. So how do you weigh up those things when you're thinking about you know, how to design the production, or say, well, we don't have to build it, we can use it, but of course we're gonna have to use a lot of travel to get there, and you know, how do you negotiate that?
Well, you just kind of, you set out how many, you know, basically it's the exteriors that give you away. You can build an interior anywhere, and as long as you're, you know, if you've got a really good set deck and art department, you can make something look like whatever. And you cherry pick your establishing shots that are outside, that you must have outside, in front of action, that you must have outside. Obviously, you might have to do those in another country, or you can pick here in Budapest. There's loads of different places that look like other countries. Look like we're shooting for Sweden right now, you know, and you know, we have all these scenes that actually look a lot like Sweden. You know, it's a great locations department that have found that, and then you can build a set with a nice window and get a beautiful backdrop that, you know, when I first started in this industry, I was painting backdrops. That was my first job. That, you know, you painted a beautiful scenic backdrop. And now you can get like a Roscoe translator backdrop that looks like anywhere. I mean, it looks photorealistic. So you don't have to go to New York. You can put a backdrop in front of a window and suddenly you're in New York. So that's just another way to eliminate having to physically burn the fuel to move you and everything and all your stuff from one place to another.
Karl, what are you seeing as a producer? What are the kind of things that you can look at and go, you know, we could just do this rather than that, and that saves us a lot?
Hire locally to start with. You grew up locally as well, because you when you're in a position where you are traveling somewhere else or setting it somewhere else, then the way that you have to trust the process is by looking and being like, okay, we're going to film. I mean, Blair covered it a bit there by essentially saying, oh, we could do 3 different countries in one country. So you're looking at the efficiency there, because it's cost effective as well, right? Because the foundation of all of these conversations is in the first instance, there's the creative side that comes in first, and then from the creative, the budget is built, and then the creative and the financial have a conversation, and we work out a plan from there. And I think if you're going into it with creative solutions as to how you can be cost effective, and those creative solutions are also sustainable, then it doesn't feel like sustainability is compromising either. It's only enhancing both. So travel crew, hiring local crew, you know, having directories where productions can tap into, where they can see which organizations, which companies are in the area, and then you have a list of 5 questions that you start with, and you basically say, are you these things? And you, from the outset, you're in a position where you're having conversations about the production being more sustainable in its makeup, as opposed to reverse engineering it when a sustainability officer comes on board, if you're fortunate enough to have one, or budget for one, or you're assuming that every crew member knows about sustainability. You put it in the makeup, you know, and it's a top-down conversation. So I know that there's a number of companies who do consultations with regards to, you know, to the first to scripts and to outlines, and you'd start looking at things and say, well, if you did this, it would do this, it would do this, and then there's the intentional, and then there's the incidental, and then you start working on those so that further down the line, it doesn't feel like a compromise. It feels like it's always been part of the creative process, and you're also not hammering it home to people. You're not banging them over the head with it. It's just it just is. It's an authentic communication. It doesn't always need to be, you know, this is a film about this, or this did this and this did this. It shouldn't be that. Like, you know, hope there aren't the less of those conversations that there are. It means that we're moving in the right direction, and everyone's got a foundation of something. The fact that we're still celebrating small wins at the minute is important, but we got to move past that as an industry, because it's not about celebrating, it's about literally transforming, and we have the power to do it. 70% of people's knowledge and opinion on sustainability and the climate and climate change comes from the media. So we are the media.
So on getting to Essex Serpent, how was sustainability built into that? Was that kind of from the? I know that Apple TV had been quite good generally about that, but was that kind of baked in from the beginning, or and maybe you can talk about like when you came onto the project, Karl, and then Lily, how you were brought on. Was that an opportunity to really think about it from the very beginning, or were you kind of halfway through going, okay, we really got to rethink our sustainability, or what was that process like?
No, it was from the start. Basically, we like I have a production manager who I work with regularly, and we're both very passionate about doing more than simply taking a wage, a credit, and creating a piece of art. Couldn't accept that as being the way that I lived anymore. And so when we boarded Essex Serpent, there were a number of things that we wanted to introduce, and we were very fortunate to have executives, company, and broadcaster who were totally on board with that. And with those things, you have to understand that you also need to explain it to people and justify it. If you just think, oh, we're going to do it, then or we want to do it, like I want never gets. You got to really explain and talk about how it's going to have a positive impact for everybody. And so we were looking for a sustainability for someone. There wasn't an industry there wasn't a sustainability officers, coordinators, consultants existed, and so we started with a sustainability consultant on the project, Amelia Price, and then from there we were like, we want somebody on the project full time. And so the conversations with Apple and with Seesaw we're all very positive about that. And we then went out. Amelia went looking for people. We went looking for people, and we interviewed a lot of people. And all of them were interested in getting. A lot of them were interested in getting or being in the film and TV industry, but and sustainability was some sort of like access for them. And it kind of comes back to the thing I was talking about before, when it's like people who create businesses because they see that as being a positive step, and people who see it as an opportunity. And I'm not wronging those people, but that's not what I was hoping for. That's not what we were looking for. And then we got Lily's CV, and Lily had just graduated. I'll let Lily tell you about what her CV was, but Lily had just graduated art school, and the production coordinator Hannah had a conversation with her, and she was just like, I think you'll like this person. So then I jumped on a call with Lily and basically talked about the fact that I wasn't looking for her to do any greenwashing on the show. I wasn't looking for her to do anything other than try and create solutions to problems, and then to flag problems and where she hit barriers, so that by the end of the production, we had a report and we could work out on our next production what actions we were going to take. And so it was really about like exposing the industry, because you don't know what you don't know. So we were I was like, go and find the problems. I'm not trying to pretend that we know all of the problems. So let's go and find the problems. And that's where we started, and that's where Lily came on board.
That's really actually fascinating, that because the automatic thinking is like, oh, we need a policeman to come in here to make sure we're doing the right thing, rather than let's analyze what's happening, you know.
Yeah,
so
and also Lily, to also say, like, Lily cared about the environment. She didn't know anything about the industry, which turned out to be great. But Lily cares, and Lily is trying to find solutions.
What is your backstory, Lily? So how did you're at film school, right? And then what had happened?
Yeah, well, I actually, the first thing I told Hannah on the call, which Karl just mentioned, was that I'd just been kicked out of Trafalgar Square during the Extinction Rebellion demonstrations, and I was on the front cover of The Sun doing my crochet top, and she said, okay, we'll maybe not mention that, but that's great. So I have been doing environmental activism for like a really, really long time. It's just something that we kind of got taught about in school when we were little kids. At the age of like 5, they kind of tell you, oh, by the way, the world might end. And you're thinking, does anyone have a plan to stop this? So just something I really, really cared about. And it was kind of the reason why I wanted to make films, was I wanted to make films that brought awareness to these issues, or like made people change behaviors. And then, yeah, I did go to film school. And then in my final year, I made my graduate film. I wrote the story. It was set on the Great Pacific Rubbish Patch, which is that like island of waste that's collected in the ocean. It's kind of set in the future, and it's just this one guy on the Great Pacific Rubbish Patch. But what that meant was all of our set dressing was literal waste. So we just collected refuse from around London for like 6 months and piled it in my garden. And we had like bins around the unis where we'd say like, green rubbish in here, please. Which was not sanitary looking back on it. But it did mean that we basically, the only thing we bought was a few bits of timber, and literally everything else, even costumes, was rubbish from like recycling centers and places like that. So that was kind of my first shot at sustainable filmmaking. There's a very, very different situation to, you know, like a big TV show like the Essex Serpent, which is like band 3, hundreds of people. And you know, when you're a student, you don't come across any of the issues to do with like power generation. You just plug your lights into a plug socket, and then suddenly someone's talking about Arctic trucks, and I'm like, what the hell are these? So yeah, that's kind of about the story.
So did you? I mean, that's fascinating that you sort of came into it, you know, pretty much fresh, and saw all this stuff there in front of you. What was your impression, kind of coming? I guess given the task that you were given to analyze and report on what was going on, and what was your impression of, you know, around the art department, but also the production generally, about sustainability issues or waste, or how things might change, just based on your first impression? Because obviously in the industry, you kind of go, well, this is the way we do things, where we've always done things, and you just get these blind spots. So.
Yeah, definitely. Well, so I started in pre-production with like no idea what was going on. It was COVID, so I was working from home. So I basically spent 4 weeks just doing as much research as I could, which is why Albert was super useful. I basically read everything on the Albert website. I read every single case study. I went through all suppliers directories. I read you guys have like a great report called like the Screen New Deal. I just read everything I could find on the internet, and then discovered like the moment I was on set that there was all this stuff that you just can't learn about. I think my first impression was not to do with the art department, because I think our art department was actually really good. Like once I left and joined other productions, I realized how good it was. My first impression was definitely about the energy usage, and being on location, using diesel generators and transport. That was the first thing that really shocked me, seeing kind of like lines of minibuses transporting people around and big generators powering things.
Just on all day long, on.
Yeah, exactly. And also I remember chatting with some people from locations, and they were explaining to me that the way you set up generators in parallel, the generators have to be running at the maximum power demand that you might have. So if your catering truck is on a line of generators that are powering a bunch of other things, when they're all empty and on standby, it has to be producing the maximum amount of power. So a lot of the time you're actually burning a lot more diesel than you need to be using, which isn't how electricity works, I discovered. So yeah, that was definitely my first impression of the sets, was transport, energy, power issues.
And then that sort of report, and I guess Karl, you can answer this as well, but that what was produced at the end that you can take forward?
So Karl asked me to I kind of kept a sustainability diary, which I did a lot of editing of, all the bits where I was like, oh, the caterers are doing this, made it sound a bit more formal. But it was kind of it ended up being a report on my analysis of all of the different problems that we faced. So I suppose I spent the period of the production going around seeing all of these problems. By nature, when I see something that's a problem, I try and fix it, and then taking note of the obstacles or the reasons why people felt we couldn't find a solution. So it kind of contained the things that we'd been successful in doing and how we'd been able to implement them. But a much larger proportion of it was the things we had not been successful in doing and what kind of barriers were there to prevent them.
And then, Mac, you ended up, CAMA nominated the Essex Serpent for the Planet Positive Award for the British Film Designers Guild. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah, we did.
Because you had been, why is that? And what you had been working with them?
Yeah, I think we'd been working with them, and our sustainability consultant, Yosine, also works with the British Film Designers Guild. So there's a bit of a connection there. And she wanted us to nominate a production. So it's pretty tricky, you know. You look at who we work with, and to be fair, you know, most of the studios have made huge progress in sustainability. But for us, just the Essex Serpent stood out because it was kind of in its DNA. It had sustainability running all the way through it, in a way that the people we dealt with really cared about it. Which is why we sort of decided to nominate them.
And then can you talk about, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and also, yeah, Apple are great sustainability advocates as well, and have been sort of from very early on.
So what work did CAMA specifically do with the Essex Serpent? And can you maybe tell us a bit more about kind of what CAMA does, and kind of the benefits that people can get from storing stuff with CAMA or reuse of sets?
Oh God,
materials?
It's a horrible question because I'm never good at sort of talking about what we do.
What do you do?
But basically, what we did is we take something that everyone needs anyway, which is post-production storage. But then when the assets come into us, we log them. We work with the production. We log them. We upload everything onto a database so that once everyone's gone off and they're working on their next creative project, the people left behind, the studio asset teams or whoever's dealing with it, can log in and they can see what's in store. So the idea being that hopefully it doesn't just sit rotting in a barn. We don't use barns forever.
What do you use? Where do you think that?
We use very, very big, insulated, expensive warehouses. But yeah, the idea being that okay, you have to hold it until picture lock, and there might be a second series or season or whatever you want to call it. But when the time comes to get rid of everything, there's a database there. There's a list with images of everything you've got, and then we can start looking at how can we donate it, how can we open it up to productions. You know, if we're doing like a medieval fantasy, can we then open it up to another production coming up so that the 5,000 swords that we've got in store don't go in a skip while someone else is making another 5,000 down the road? Mm-hmm. You know, there are a lot of assets that are fairly generic that can be passed on. And that's really our job. Our purpose is, we're a post-production storage company. But that's a bit of a red herring. Our actual purpose, our mission, is to get all of those assets back into the industry as far as possible. And if we can't get them back into the industry, then we work with the studios to donate them to good causes. So some good comes out of them.
And is that are you primarily serving kind of UK productions, or is that kind of a UK ecosystem that you're serving?
No, it's literally UK at the moment. We're trying to work on some collaborations around the country. And it comes back to something Karl was saying earlier. At the moment, we're literally the only company in the world that does this, which I find a huge responsibility. So we're looking at how can we collaborate with other companies that have got infrastructure that we can help to build up this service, in all of the major filming locations. So for example, we're working on a project in Cardiff at the moment, and we're hoping to get something set up down there with a partner that they can offer to people filming around Cardiff and Bristol. And then we'll hopefully take it all around the country.
So what do you think about virtual productions, virtual set, LED screens, being able to kind of shoot a lot of stuff on on a soundstage with these sort of great new virtual set and Unreal Engine kind of generated technology?
Well,
do you see that being a big move forward?
I think that's brilliant, because the biggest issue we have is repurposing sets. It comes back to what Blair led with, really. That's our problem. Our problem is repurposing sets. And as Lily said, a lot of these sets are covered in foam. It's horrible. Once something's covered in foam, it's almost impossible to recycle it in a sustainable way. So by taking a lot of the sets out, I think you're removing a lot of the problem.
Is that Karl, what from a producer standpoint do you think about, like virtual sets, green screen, doing stuff on a soundstage? So
I'm now head of production at 6040 Films, so moving in-house, and we have just done a whole series that involves a lot of the volume virtual production, and it's a game changer. I think that there's a lot of considerations to it, and it involves like a great deal of planning and commitment to a plan, which is no bad thing when it comes to sustainability either, because changing plans is one of the things that naturally leads to wastes, whether it be human energy or other energy. But yeah, Hijack, we shot on a stage, and a lot of the elements of that, and it's tracking it so that you're not in a position where you're, a great director who everyone was really across, the DP was really across it. Everyone got really involved in understanding it, and that's the important thing to start with. Like, you can't just go in thinking it's going to be a solution. You have to really understand it, otherwise you do end up in a situation where you may be compromised further down the line. But we had the volume was there for the whole time. We shot 70% of it on a stage, and it's set on an airplane. So there's a lot of elements to it and tracking it. As I said before, is like those commitments mean that you don't end up having to do, if you end up getting it wrong and you got to do VFX down the line to fix something that was potentially could have been green screen, then that's when you get into difficulties with justifying it. But fortunately, we've we're in post now and it looks pretty incredible.
Right. Can you, Blair, can you see that being a thing where it's like you really have to be like twist someone's arm to like go to Budapest?
No, everybody really likes to shoot here. There's not enough spaces. There's like production, there's not enough people or spaces here. Like it seems like it's like the darling child right now.
Yeah.
But going back to like what you guys were saying on hiring local, which is also really great, that goes into hand in hand in the fact that most crew are clustered around a major city. You know, there's not enough crew out there. Everybody's experiencing this. There's really not enough people who are skilled at the trade to support the vast amount of content that's being churned out these days. You know, so another solution to that is mentoring and different ways of teaching and getting people in early. And not everybody needs to go to a fancy film school. Not everybody needs to go to university to get a craft degree. I mean, those are great routes, and you know, those are, you learn so much from those routes. But there's other crew levels, and there's other things that you can learn from being in the field and learning a trade, and just like learning the actual physical skills and learning from us. I mean, all of us have made almost every mistake you could possibly make, and you can't learn that through academia. And you know, I think I'm really big on education and mentoring and you know, helping the people that, yeah, I didn't have any of that. You know, I was throwing darts at the walls and following unit signs and going on to, you know, the AD buses going, can I make some copies for you, you know, to try to get into jobs. And you know, if we can help people and everywhere, you know, through Zoom, through small bite-sized courses, you know, you can get people in all sorts of cities having an infrastructure where there wasn't one then. So you don't need to ship the same crew from place to place to place to place to place. We could share this web of collective knowledge and not have to transport ourselves, like I said earlier.
So that kind of brings me to the British Film Designers Guild, and kind of how do you see the roles of like the guilds or any kind of you know, trade organizations in being able to, I guess, raise awareness, create, you know, to educate, to create some maybe some solidarity around these issues in terms of people being like, no, we're not going to do that. We're actually going to do this, you know, rather than kind of harnessing the power of that group.
Well, the main crux of what interested me in the guild and why I'm there is that whole aspect of community and the sharing, because I feel everybody in this industry, we all kind of take things on board and keep our cards close to our you know, our chest and don't want to admit mistakes, and we're kind of going at things alone, and nothing can be done alone. We have to work with each other. We have to communicate with all the other departments. We have to communicate with amongst ourselves. The more sharing of information and you know, communicating all of your thoughts, all of what you're going to try to do, and you know, sometimes it's a simple little answer that somebody will give you that will save a huge mistake that was something being done and then having to be redone. So the guild in itself is just a great sounding board, water cooler for all of us to be able to tap the resources of each other and share all of our collective knowledge with the next people coming up. And, you know, we help each other, find out about problems, we help kind of stem the tide of those problems. You know, it's the biggest support group that you can have is each other's hive mind. And I just want to grow it and grow it and grow it. And so that, you know, everybody has access to it. All of us have access to all of our collective knowledge. It will help across every aspect of our filmmaking.
So we're getting up to the top of the hour here, so just about to end our webinar conversation before we go to open Q&A with everybody. I guess one last thing, what would you, just looking at it from the point of view of the art department, or what would you ask from other departments that they could do to help you in terms of helping your job be more sustainable, or helping you to eliminate waste, to lower your carbon footprint? What is it that you need from other departments?
Just find an efficient way to be more communicative, to be more transparent. I mean, a lot of people work upon that thing of a need to know basis. But I find that, if you don't plan end of life from the very beginning for every single thing that you're doing, and everybody's on board doing that, you get down to the very end where like there's one person standing there holding everything, and they don't know that the location's being off hired the next day, or that you're losing all your transport the week after that. And so they're just like, why is it my responsibility? Okay, in the skip it goes, because I can't do this. So every single department needs to be on one big grid. There just needs to be. It's hard to say as well, because it's a movable feast. It changes all the time. You're making things up sometimes as you go along, but the more transparency there is across all the departments, the more what their needs are. And you're like, oh man, I can help you out with that. Or, oh, if I make this change and do something on this day, then that might actually help what you're doing. And it's just, it's collective. It's the only way to make it work.
Mac, what about you in terms of that, kind of as you're working with clients, or what is it that you need from them, or kind of what they do for you?
We kind of work across all departments. The one biggest change that would help, not us, but sustainability generally, would be to be if we could get people thinking about what they're going to do with assets earlier on, at almost at point of purchase, having some sort of standing instructions about different categories and what would happen with them, because what invariably happens is at RAP, everyone's going crazy. Everyone's trying to get everything tied up as quickly as possible. And if there was some way of getting people to think about stuff earlier, I think less would just go in the skip from a production, and probably less would go to store as well. So I think we get a much better balance. But that would be my thing, is just getting people to think about what they're doing with an asset when they buy it or create it.
Very beginning.
Yeah, and that's something we are working on. We're getting there slowly.
Karl?
The industry's got to change, transform. It's really simple. It's got to be radical as well, because of the broadcasters' commitment to net zero. So we can't piss around patting each other on the back anymore about this incremental change. It's got to be seismic. In order for the broadcasters to hit their target, the industry is going to transform. So therefore, all of the departments have to get on board with that, and we need to be working out ways in which we can be much more sustainable, produce less carbon emissions, not think about offsetting, because if everybody tried to offset, there isn't enough room in the world for all the offsetting to take place. So therefore, we've got to start insetting. Every department has to get on board with this, otherwise they won't have a place in the industry. There is a new generation coming through that is ready, with all of their ideas and all of their passion and all of their awareness of what's going on. So it kind of can't be ignored, because otherwise people will start not being able to work. But the broadcasters have a responsibility to start setting stuff as mandates. They've had targets, but in order to hit targets, you've got to be in a position where you have parameters which people have to start working under. It's not, there is incremental steps, there is step change that is still required, but what's coming is that this is now going to become a much more shared responsibility for every individual on every single film and TV set. So educating everyone on how they get to that point within their departments, within their roles, will then lead to everyone having a level of accountability. There's no point one person, a sustainability office, going around and getting in everyone's shit to make things better and nagging them. That's not going to work.
Yeah.
Like that might, you know, it gets stuff done, but a transformation only happens when everyone takes responsibility for their part in it, and that's where we have to get to. There is literally no choice. Film stars a choice because there's not the mandates, there's the desire, and there's the preference to do things a certain way. But broadcasters have literally made a commitment. There in high-end TV, there is no choice anymore. It's just how and when it's going to happen.
There
Right.
needs to be universal terminology, and it just needs to be kind of a normal. You know, we didn't used to have that kind of normal with, you know, sexual harassment, or, you know, with bullying, or any of the other things that used to go on, more common. And now there's terms, and there's needs, and there's, you know, there's kind of a template that's set up that everybody knows. So, you know, we just need that to come into place, where you know what should be done. You know, it's ingrained, it's rote in our minds. You know, we need to get to that stage.
And just piggybacking off of that from Blair is that the organization, as much as what I alluded to before, like, everyone's got to get on the same page with what wants to happen here. We need like 4 things that everyone agrees have to happen, and then everyone else can up the ante on what they want to do. And, you know, that like, then you can go into competition, healthy competition about who's doing more and all that sort of stuff. But like, the foundation of communication, because the messaging has to be the same. Otherwise people can go, oh, well, I was on that show and they did this, and I went on that show and they did this, and I went on that show and they did this. And it's just like, how this happens is that it's like the baseline is X. Like with COVID, you know, COVID's an example of that baseline, right? And I'm not using COVID as an example as many other people use it, like, oh, we can, you know, we found the money for COVID. We found the money for COVID because ultimately we found the money for COVID because films make money. Sustainability doesn't necessarily make money. So let's just remove that from the conversation. But the foundation of the education, the commitment to the way that we were going to keep each other safe was this. And then all of the different organizations and companies then went above that at their choice, you know, so that it was accessible for bands 1, band 2, band 3, band 4, high-end feature film, low budget feature films, but there was a baseline. And that's what we got to establish. Everyone, Albert, Screen Skills, like all of these organizations, BAFTA, everyone's got to get on the same page, get in the same room and go, what are we doing? What are we doing? But get all the broadcasters in and be like, what are we doing? Like, what's the plan? Because that's the power that this industry has, and that's the responsibility that we have as well. And so as much as the crew can want something, it has to come from it. Like, it's much easier if the broadcaster says you have to do this. You know, it's much more powerful than Lily saying you have to do this, please.
Just following on from that, there in the art department, there are cost savings to be made in sustainability. When it comes to materials, there are cost savings to be made. They can only be made by studios because it requires the startup capital to buy more durable materials. The studios can save money. Warner Brothers could have built 100 flats in 1920 and they could still be using them today. And instead they've spent millions of pounds on timber. You've got 2 options when it comes to materials. You can recycle them. That costs money, and people think recycling is infinite. It's not. You can recycle wood maybe 7 times before it becomes useless. So you can recycle things or you can reuse them. If you want to reuse them, you're going to need to give people money and time to design something reusable. But then what are you going to do with it? And that's why CAMA is so important right now, because you need the infrastructure there to begin with to put those things in place. It's like with electric cars, you need the electric car chargers first. So studios need to start investing in the infrastructure, giving people the money and the time beforehand to design things that are reusable, because you've literally got the best designers in the country designing things for you. So just give them an extra few months to design something that you can then use for the rest of your, and there is money saving to be made in the art department. Not so much in other places, but there is money to be saved, but only by the studios, not by siloed budgets, not by the art, not by the head of the art department, not by your production designers. There's no incentive for them. It's only the execs that have that incentive.
Good point.
I think that's an amazing sort of point to end on as well. That idea that you literally have the best designers in the world, you know, they're best concept artists, visionaries, people whose job it is to come up with something new and crazy and amazing and cool. And if you say, these are your parameters, this is what you have to do, figure it out. You know, what an amazing thing to be able to have access to those people to come up with new things and new ideas and whole new ways of doing stuff. So thank you so much, guys. It was wonderful to have you and to hear you. We're going to end this part of our webinar and we're going to open it up to questions from the viewers. And I think we do have some. Let's see, we've got, I'm just going to read a few. We have quite a lot. Amazing. Question, how are the statistics, what are the statistics on the carbon footprint of the art department? All carbon footprint calculators in Europe are separating the art department from the rest of the production. I don't know if that's true or not. Is there some idea about how to change that? In terms of how Albert calculates the art department, I don't know that that's the case, but we can have somebody have a look at that. But I think there is a question about that. Do you have an idea of what the carbon footprint of the art department is? There is travel, obviously, which goes through everything, but kind of that travel aside.
For our production, the way that it was broken down was material use through the Albert calculator. So that's set construction, costume, and art department stuff. That was roughly 20% of our total emissions. But as you were saying, transport, the way that it was calculated through Albert, transport has its own kind of very hefty section. So some of the art department CO2 emissions are embedded in the transport side of things. So that's just on materials. And one interesting thing that we found was that textiles were a pretty big chunk of our production. It was a period drama, so there were a lot of costumes, but it was surprising to me.
That's interesting. What happens with the carbon footprint in terms of, I mean, if stuff goes to the skip and you don't know where it's going to go, I mean, that could just go into a landfill and just be rotting and it's all methane. So after, when that just goes off in terms of calculating that carbon footprint for the art department,
well, we used waste management suppliers that could tell us where it was going. So we used recycling companies that could give us by weight. When it went to the waste management facility, they would weigh how much was going into where. So we were able to calculate with some rough accuracy the emissions of disposal, but that again was like another section of the way that the footprint was calculated. So disposal was its own separate thing. So materials was basically the kind of embedded carbon cost in manufacturing the material, not including its transportation or its disposal.
So here's a question from George. George says, productions need to learn from Kickstarter campaigns and repurpose an unusable props and stuff. For example, they should be given to fans. Crowdfunding projects given away as perks. Auction stuff off for charity. Fans want stuff. Comments from the panel, please. I mean, there's something interesting in that. The idea that, you know, you've got all these amazing assets. Can they go to fans?
I've done this on a very small scale on little things, but one of the biggest problems is intellectual property rights on something, and also being able to have spoilers of how something is made. You don't want to break the mystique of how, like a particular prop. You don't really want it. It's glorious on camera. You don't really want to see behind the curtain. So a lot of productions won't release props or won't release sets. And then, you know, also by the time a film wraps and goes through edit and is finally released and people can actually see it, you know, a year and a half, 2 years might have gone by. So you're storing those things during all that time as well, which just compounds it and makes it an even, you know, bigger issue because you're, you know, housing it and storing it during all that time. So it's not as simple as being able just to get rid of something on the wrap day. You often can't. You're under NDA. But I've always wanted to be able to give little bits and pieces for fans, or, you know, something special, little hero prop that somebody will cherish this. But it can be a bit political, so it's not as straightforward as that.
I guess the Universal Studios idea and when it was launched was that we'll create a theme park around this, and people can go look at the sets and all that stuff.
Yes, that was great.
Where's my Essex Serpent theme park?
So we did donate nearly the entirety of our set builds to a university, which might be a good example of like the difficulty in doing these kind of schemes. So I decided about 6 months before wrap that this was something I wanted to try and do. It took 6 months to get clearance from the various people involved, production company, TV company. When I was then liaising with people who might take the sets, I wasn't allowed to give them any photographs or tell them where they were or what production they were from. So I could give them vague measurements. I then went and hand painted out identifiable details. So that's like a flower on a cupboard door that someone might recognize from the TV show. Paint out all of the names that people draw on the back of the flat. I think the action props, the kind of props that you're talking about fans wanting to have, are like that's the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the materials. There's also 200 costumes from like extras in the background that people are not going to be so interested in. So there's a lot of stuff that is not like Batman's mask. That still has like these problems with clearance where they don't want it ending up in anyone's backyard. But also people aren't as interested in it. Like, do you want a bunch of marble chip that we use to, cover a dock?
And that is, I guess, part of the magic is that it's like, but this is a piece of crap. But if you shoot it right and light it right, it's gorgeous. But Mac, I wondered about from your end, do you see any reuse of the sets you have in the kind of more interesting non-film context?
Yeah, well, it's quite interesting. There's two things here. One is kind of the opposite of the accepted norm, in that we're working at the moment with I'm not allowed to say who it is at this stage, but we're working with a very, very long running TV series in the UK. And they want to do exactly that. They want to sell off stuff. It'll be very popular. And they're saying, well, actually, what happens is, unfortunately, things get stolen, things end up on eBay. And they say, well, why don't we do this? Why don't we? And actually, what they want to do is they want to sell off these hero items they're never going to use again. And really obscure stuff like mobile phones that the fans are desperate to get hold of. And the idea is they'll raise money and they're going to donate that to charity, which I thought was quite nice. But also they want to monetize the assets they're keeping by renting them out to conferences. For if you're having a party at home, it's a sort of show where you might want some stuff for a big party or a conference, things like that. And there's another studio we're working with. They're saying, well, actually, what we'll do is they're sort of starting their own prop house, because they've got all these stuff, they've got these assets they've purchased. So now they want to try and monetize them and make the assets work for them.
The BBC used to have a huge prop house when they used to have everything internal. And then, not too long ago, they just went, let's minimize, let's make our space. Just got rid of it all. But for years and years and years, it was like this little ecosystem. It was great. Why?
Well, and that's funny. It's a conversation we had recently was with the BBC. I can talk about that one. Well, we spoke about that they used to have this prop house, and then the accountants made them get rid of it, and now they want to get it back again because what we can prove is that by reusing the assets, you're creating, you're making money, you're saving money, so you're making money, but you're also saving carbon. And I think one of the important things is if we can show how much money you save by reusing assets and how much carbon, then it gets traction. And that's one of the things we're able to do now.
Could you see, maybe a question for you, Karl? I mean, could you see starting to think about productions that way, about like, okay, what is the lifespan of these sets, these props, the assets that we built after the production? How can we reuse these, the things that we built or how can, you know, they be maybe even monetized after the production's over?
Yeah, I mean, anything's better than waste, right? That's that's our foundation, and like exactly what Mike's talking about. You get a situation where the studios are essentially creating a directory of everything that's in their studio system. Like, it might even be cheaper to ship stuff and to another part of the country than to be created. It will be cheaper in most instances than creating it. And imagine that there's all these directories. I know that there's like, the costume designers are like, you know, they've been screaming for this. There's I won't say her name, but a friend and someone who's very active and passionate about this sort of area with regards to like creating what a CAMA for costume, if you like, and she actually went to CAMA and was just like, after initial concerns with regards to like, how does this work, then seeing how CAMA operate and being like, this is unbelievable. Like, there's a whole directory. So you imagine that there's a directory of all these costumes. You just look, you know, there's certain, you know, there's a administrative task, a huge administrative task in this. But if someone's prepared to take that on, then it creates a foundation for just for constant sharing. And there's enough, you know, the broadcasters all have enough productions within this country that, you know, the people are going back to the same location and doing the same facade. It's just like, use that facade. Just let's make that a fictional place that exists in this world, in these shows. And so, yeah, there's the IPs that Blair mentioned before, and there's certain considerations, but for sure that like there is a move towards this. It's just it has to be broken down so that the advantages of it are very clear, and it's not just like, this is something that will save the planet. Like that conversation, you know, there's too many businesses in this arena now, and so it has to come from, here's a solution to a problem that will save you money. I mean, where do you go with that apart from okay? Like, there's not like, let's explore it. You know, the thing is that let it get interrogated. Let all of these proposals be interrogated as they should, but let's start conversations about it and work out the way forward to make things better.
Somebody's asking, thank you so much for that. So somebody was asking a couple things. If there are, first of all, if Lily's diary is available to read, or if that report is available to read.
It's not. It was produced exclusively for the broadcaster, but like, yeah, there's, yeah. So that's not at present. Not at present.
Not my personal diary.
Yeah, no, yeah. Lily, well, Lily can talk about her personal diary. That's the one, the angry one about the caterers. But the caterers were great. So just to caveat that as well.
It's just all redacted.
Black lines.
And then somebody was also asking about, you know, are there resources available to be able to look at some of these sustainability best practices in the art department? I know obviously there's the Albert website and Albert case studies. I would urge you to check out. But also, Blair, are there other things that you can recommend that people can go to, apart from, you know, learning as you go on set, but being able to educate themselves?
Well, there's starting to be a lot, like Albert's absolutely fantastic. I mean, I've been following the initiative for a good 10 years now, working with the BBC and ITV. But there are starting to be other organizations worldwide that are starting to have a little bit more information. And so I've been actually, for the last 6 months, been collecting every single link. So I want to start like a page that has every bit of information that you could possibly find. Eventually, that's going to be on the BFDG website. For now, we're still kind of gathering things together, but I could just say Albert again, that's like one of the best things that you could find.
Are there things on the BFDG website though now that people can check out?
Little bits and pieces, but we're still growing. You know, it's still, you know, we still have a bit of growth to go. It's a lot of things are very internal member oriented at the time. I mean, I'm personally, as a designer, I'm a circular designer. I've like for the entire time I've been working in the art department, I've made a concerted effort to try to do things in a sustainable way, even, you know, in the 80s when I began. You know, I'm taking this on board and leading the charge and trying to be a voice for that. So if it circles back to me, there's definitely things on my own personal website at the time being, but I'm going to tie that in with the BFDG as chair.
Great. A question, I think this is a question for producers, from Simon. How do we make space within the production process to allow interventions such as those CAMA or other companies might make to make the biggest impact? So I guess maybe it's a question about, like, if you see a production, how do you try to squeeze into that space to let people know what's available or other possibilities?
Was that to me?
I think that's you.
So can you just the question again? So is the question in relation to the market or businesses, or is it, sorry?
I think it's I think it's like there are companies out there that are doing certain things. So how can those companies find their way into the space, I guess? How can those companies be brought into productions when they might not, you know, there might not even be awareness about the possibilities and the services that are out there?
Got it. So that's a really good question, actually, and one that we're actively, as heads of production, trying to work out a solution to. And obviously, we are in conversations with Albert in relation to this, but you know, not speaking out to him, but the simplest solution in a dream scenario would be that there is a directory that every company that exists, much like K's or other books exist, and you basically sign up to the directory. You go through a process of asking a certain number of questions, and then you get on the directory, and then from that point you work towards a situation where you are an approved supplier, if you like, where you are certified as a green supplier. So there's my dream. There's the dream. I don't say my dream because that's the dream, and the reason why the one of the groups that I am part of exists is very much working towards a situation where there isn't a list of people who are proven green suppliers, but it also allows everybody on the list and then to work towards a place where they are a green supplier. Because, you know, small, medium-sized businesses, SMEs, new entrants, like it's as much about their intention as it is about what they have the actual ability at the time to do. So I think that's where those companies can get a platform. But until that happens, hit up the production companies. You know, I get phone calls, I get emails from caterers saying, you know, we're looking to do this, and my questions are, okay, what are you doing in relation to sustainability? How do you operate? Do you operate sustainability? Do you operate sustainably? You know, all of those things. Get looking into the field. Look at the companies who are in the field at present and the shows that they've managed to get on, and then contact the companies of the shows that those companies have been on and become competitors, because then you know that there's already been an action on one of those shows to take sustainability forward. So therefore there's something there, and then when a production starts, then the head of production or whoever it is will pass your details on, because it's like, oh, we got this, you know, the amount of companies who work in this field is still relatively small. So when something crosses your desk that looks as though it could be a solution to something, you take it pretty seriously, because everything's, you know, if it's innovative enough, then you can see it as a potential solution to a problem. So it's not like, you know, a camera supplier or a kit hire company, you know, there are lots of those and they all offer different things. But within the sustainability space, if you find a problem, then, and you can solve a problem for the industry, then that's a pretty good starting place. But yeah, I would say hit up the companies that are already, you know, that are already showing actions around that area, and then build from there.
Great.
And hit up Mac, because he knows all the people who are hitting up his storage as well.
Yeah, I've had this conversation with Karl. We're a non-competitive collaborative company. I think that's how we describe ourselves, or how I do anyway. So we're very happy if other people want to come into our space. We're very happy to work with them and collaborate rather than compete.
Great. Tony had an interesting observation here that was just that assistance with transport and collection of props to be donated would be a huge help. Prop masters are often not able to help with this, and that prevents some donations. Some charities don't even have vans that they can send out. So that's the interesting thing of just the simple infrastructure. Like, I got all these stuff, you know, I can't have somebody pick these up. If somebody can only come and pick these things up. It's interesting that just little.
CAMA is the solution. Once again, isn't that right, Mac? When you donate things to
But
CAMA,
will you send a van round?
We can do. We try and kind of what do you call it? Part load. So yeah, we hate to send little bits and pieces all over the place, but we like to send lots of stuff that we can deliver to multiple people at the same time, because that keeps our carbon footprint down. But yes, yeah, we can deliver. And actually, a lot of the times the studios are quite happy to pay for that. They'll quite happily, the cost of the transport is far lower than the cost of recycling, and it's being reused. So it's a win-win.
Somebody has pointed out that BFDG have an art department sustainability guide.
Great.
That's true. That's true. There was a lot of the BFDG branches did it during COVID, actually. So camera branch did one, makeup did one, art department did one, and they're all a solid foundation, and something that all the departments want to build up as well. There again, it comes back to that. Everybody has an energy around this. Everyone wants to move things forward, and it's just making sure that we're efficient with everyone's desire to move things forward, so that nobody's doubling up on things.
And one point I'd like to make there about the supply chain is that there's so much money in film and television that you need to think of yourself as this like link in a chain with like huge influential amount of power. The kinds of contracts that you can be offering suppliers are just enormous. And so once you start telling suppliers, I want sustainable solutions, I'm going to come back to you and you can give me what I want. I'm going over here because they're more sustainable than you. That's how the market works. They're going to start meeting the demand. So even if you can't find a sustainable solution in that moment because you've got a day to sort it out, the more demanding you are and using your voice as a member of an organization that has a lot of money and a lot of influential power, you can really start to shift suppliers towards what you're looking for. It's a very adaptable industry and people are always listening to what you want. So you can really use that power to try and move suppliers where you want them to be.
So ask, even though if you're not sure you're going to be able to get it.
Ask, tell them what you want. Say, do you have this? Do you have that? I need this. I want that. I'll come back to you. I'm going elsewhere.
And within that as well, there's the opportunity, because you're with the smaller organizations, you say, okay, you know, say this directory comes together, you got a directory and there's somebody who doesn't have a blue tick next to their name, a sustainability tick next to the name, but everyone else is busy, or everyone else is like far too expensive for you. Basically go to the people who don't have a tick in the organization who don't have a tick. You say, okay, so you don't have a tick. What are you like what's stopping you from getting there? And do you have it, first of all, do you have intention to try and get one, or you just on this directory to be on this directory? And if they say, yeah, we're trying to get there, but you know, we don't have the financial resources, and it's like, okay, well, if I give you this contract, you know, will you then commit to X, Y, and Z? So you hold them to their word and you say, okay, I'm going to invest in you. I'm going to invest in you by giving you my business. But then with that, I want to support you to move forward and become more sustainable. So you're helping each other out, and the production companies not just saying, oh, we're not going with the sustainable supplier. They're saying, we'll go with you, but there's caveats to this.
Great. Blair, I think you were about to say something earlier, and I think I cut you off. Was there something you wanted to?
I don't remember.
Okay. Because you just started, and I think I cut you off. Somebody's mentioned a company called Greenset in Cape Town.
Yes.
No, I'm sorry. Greenset in Cape Town is working with a company called Envirolites, who have developed a prototype machine to upcycle PU foam into building blocks. An upgrade to this machine was funded by Netflix, so the machine could process screws impeded in the foam.
So I did look into a lot of these foam schemes. In the UK, there are people that will recycle foam into foam bricks. There's no demand for the foam bricks. So all of the people I contacted said, we don't want any more foam. We just got loads and loads of foam bricks. It might be a different situation in Cape Town. Maybe they're more sought after in the industry, but there are some materials that I really think are just maybe a bit of energy is going in the wrong direction towards what do we do with this really toxic foam at the end, rather than being like, how do we avoid using the foam in the first place, which I think in the instance of foam is the answer. Like, it's just gotta go.
Could you just give it to fans?
Yeah,
they can come pick it up.
Well, anyway, that brings us to 5:30 here in London and the end of our time together. I want to thank you all so much, Mac, Lily, Karl, Blair. It was really enlightening and inspiring. And people have your bios, I believe, are on the, or they're not on the website, but we'll put them on the website with links so that people will be able to at least see where you guys are and what you're doing, and potentially get a hold of you if that's something you want to do. Yeah, thank you from Albert. Thank you from all our viewers. And this will be posted on our YouTube page in the next couple of weeks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks,
everybody.
everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
It's really
Take
interesting.
actions.